Jamgön Kongtrül Lodrö Thaye Jamgön Dene dajen sajö dalsön yönden lüzo jase etüvöku. Chödrak chödon chönye jende dalömez Jamgön Namda zurim serje sajete Denzen bamerlin göbenze Şarab nyede nongve çögün sap Tumşon rove lama şage Regum sabe menrudan besi Remni lamje lobru tremajon Deçin kujen revo tenzebe Yanzen lama gübre Sarp Gundo Siye Daniele, Tange Samu Shavi Yongzong Shi, Shanchum Yimbe Lamken Karma Ba, Mise de Jive Zuge Du Lasso, Jabsun Drove, Semdan, Shanchup Du, Sem Jepai Rinpoche, Ni Sal Tamne Seronang.
So please begin by taking refuge in the three jewels and to generate the body-mind in its two perspectives.
Lasso, tene, ta ngazo kachang ge ne mutu ne shuyung de. Tanda Chödrak yaktap tempekap la. Tinche ji yaktap, timi ji yaktap. Ngoni ji yaktap sum le tinche ji kapre.
We're going through the section of the text which is about the actual meditation and its various perspectives, and we've gone through the first part of the subdivision, which is about developing a calm state on the basis of a so-called concrete support. That is followed by setting the mind without a concrete support, which again is followed by the subdivision which sets forth how to set the mind in the so-called essential nature.
Tati tinche jinetla mikbe ten la mada beche takachang shushure ten ji cha ne lo de tongbo gamla nati gyore.
So with respect to the first of these three methods, setting the mind with a concrete support, there are two perspectives. That of a so-called impure support, meaning or being a reference to anything in the world. So it's a regular thing that can be found anywhere and therefore called impure support, in that it's a thing, a regular thing in the world. Then there is the second type, a so-called pure support, which will be explained today.
Tanipate Takpe Tenjintela Tombo Kuzula Mikpate Paha Chevre. Tate penna sanje kutin raw. Tene ta thangbo kutin rambi pate du chik tab degin do na kutin sor ye cham che.
Te laso tap tene
sor ye cham che che chi la mi pate.
Kutengi chechung
Chechung. Ta tende la mi pate kamsona tene kutin ya chembo la mi pate. Yang chung tong pate.
det är semla.
Ja, sem mi pate.
Ina tongne kuten te semgi mikpare. Korang chilola shayomarwa.
Chelo jagde. Denjerwa.
Re tenche re chetane semla chempu gom.
Ta
Chung gom sung.
de denje la mi pate kamsona segidwa.
Okay.
Kamsona tene sem ki na yang je kutin chembo la mi pate ba ta chung pate la mi pate ba tende ki yewa yang yungge yore.
So, with respect to a so-called impure concrete support, in terms of generating a calm state and then abide in that calm state. One starts with a so-called impure support and trains until one has achieved some level of capacity in terms of being able to rest in a calm state. Then one can go on to meditate on a so-called pure concrete support, which an example of which would be an image of the Buddha, either a statue or a painting, for example. Now, when one begins meditating with a pure support, the size of the statue, painting, photograph of the Buddha that one uses should not be larger or smaller than the height of the four fingers of the fist of the hand. Now, once some skill has been acquired on the basis of this concrete support, then the meditator can go on to visualize the image of the Buddha. And here he should train as to various sizes. Very, very large sized images of the Buddha in the mind's eye, and also very, very tiny ones, in order to train his capacity to focus one-pointedly, regardless of size and the like.
Tene yang song yingzhu la mikpa tepa song de.
Another so-called pure support is that of a so-called seed syllable.
Tan de chedan yong da ne ta yige akka atiya da aji mikpa ten ja tel mikpa te da.
So one can begin by using a drawing of a seed syllable. For example, the seed syllable a.
Tema se ranang ji yidam ke so yi de ti chen te mikpa te na rigi yosare.
or the seed syllable of the yidam that one meditates on as a daily practice.
Tene yang tu shansin lambi pateba songate.
One can also focus on a drawing or painting of one of the attributes of the yidam.
That is tu shansin lambi pateba sayat so penata shansin pemandravo rajendravo dorjendravo that tendel mi pateba.
And there are many such attributes: a lotus flower, a vajra, a sword, and so on.
Tan don nan den so mi pate tu khande ch gogresana desung getoga tenne rimbushi which.
So when focusing either on a pure support or an impure support, what level of effort should there be in terms of the mind that focuses in order to be able to rest in a calm state? While the mindset should neither be too tight nor too loose or relaxed.
Penalande gamdam chome nan pen song de gedo tramzege kupa kalwanda which gore song it.
And there is an example which one finds in many, if not more or less all, texts that are about meditation instructions, namely that the manner of concentrating should be similar to the way a Brahmin twines his cord. That is to say, neither too tight nor too loose.
Tande mixe get tramze kupa kalwa sagi yayande. Tene jagal di tej zog doa. Tanda. Red tatap shivuche de kansa doti zoyach. Red tatap shivuche pen tsiko non dona do chonki rechik.
Doti di sötsan doti chatsang di nangla.
Yeah.
Shongtupa.
Shongtupach. Ta ti ge Thaye ge kupachi yorwa. Kupatel hachang dhammata, hachang lemata shivuch god.
Tenedi tramsegi chi konyajik tuwa. Di mare.
Ti insare tension de shubu te mare songudwa.
Well, members of the Brahmin caste wear a cord across the chest and the back. And this is what usually is referred to in terms of the example. However, the example just given, which then gives a description of what kind of mindset should be at hand when making efforts to focus one-pointedly, when making efforts to develop one-pointed attention of an object of meditation. Though there are some who explain that this is in fact a reference to the material of a so-called dhoti, the main garment a Brahmin wears, which starts at the waist and goes down to the ankles, and it's a very thin fabric which is tied in a specific manner. which signifies that the person who wears this garment is of the Brahmin caste. Now, in the old days, it appears the Brahmins would themselves weave that cloth, which is supposedly exceedingly thin. Now, a so-called dhoti, this garment, would involve a couple of meters of fabric. Even so, you could pull it through a ring you wear on your ring finger, because the cloth is so thin or thinly woven. And when weaving this cloth, the weaver, the person who weaves this piece of cloth, must pay attention to that the thread is neither too tight nor too loose. So the example is either about the Brahmin cord worn across the chest or that garment. At any rate, what the example tells the person told of the example is that when you train in order to develop one-pointed attention, your mindset must not be too tight nor too loose.
Lasso, tatike tinchela big betsu the hanam roi sare.
So that ends the first method, that of setting the mind with a concrete support.
Tatinchela big patela tenne, chik sem la shivan nebando, sem to, seneshanda bungosu yontu, tenne the pa meba chane, ten temela kamchu gore song.
So the practitioner, having trained on the basis of these two types of concrete support, once he has achieved some level of skill in terms of being able to rest in a calm state, he has been able to maintain one-pointed attention for some time. Then he is ready to go on to train, setting the mind without concrete support.
Lasso. Kupa kelvetsu. Kupa kelvetsu in this dempet.
Twines. Lasso. Och det kupa sådur, va?
Zodu.
Well, in terms of the example, in the Tibetan text, the word used in terms of trying to figure out exactly what the example is about, one can, when thinking of the verb used in terms of dealing with the material while fabricating either a cord or a dhoti, the garment in question, that actually it's about spinning the thread or the threads, which later on will be woven either into a cord or a piece of fabric to be used for the garment mentioned. So it's about the very beginning. It's not the weaving process itself, it's about spinning the strings that then will be used in the process of weaving the fabric or twining the cord.
That Jamgön Rinpoche ne Chödrak kupa teke. Then the fabric the Thaye fabric the final shoot chagu yosara.
Kan du som kupa det?
Kupa te hajang temata hajang he mata se Chödrak teke. Fabric the jut zone red miss final chagu yosara.
Trapped up chag.
Trapped up tang teni yang petrombo yor sigdot.
Apparently, when the threads later on, which are later on used to weave the fabric with, during their production of spinning the thread, when the thread is neither too tight nor too loose, apparently that's the reason for being able to weave this very, very thin fabric, which in spite of being very thin, is also warm.
Ti independent anso ke semde hajang jamata hajang le mata mikpa takara gela netwache.
So shamatha meditation is about developing a mindset of one-pointed attention, which is neither too tight nor too loose.
Tepena mikpa dam thana ne tingin je tugmade.
If the mindset is too tight, then samadhi cannot evolve.
Shivarsan egmade.
Because when the mindset is too tight, that makes for perturbation, and it makes it impossible for the practitioner to rest in a calm state. And too tight a mindset will never be a basis in dependence upon which the practitioner could be able to continue with vipassana meditation. Too tight a mindset isn't a suitable basis for vipassana meditation. As it is too tight. On the other hand, if the mindset is too relaxed, too loose, then sooner or later, the process of feeling drowsy usually happens and ends with the practitioner falling asleep. So it's very important that the mind is neither too tight nor too loose in order to be able to at all do meditation. Now, in terms of the progression from setting the mind with a concrete support to setting the mind without a concrete support, independence upon a concrete support, the practitioner has been able, in the case of him being the type of person who is too tight, to relax that a bit. And therefore able to some extent rest in a calm state. And that at that point, or if that is achieved, the practitioner could go on to the second phase of setting the mind without a concrete support. So this is about focusing without a physical support, though in the mind's eye there is what one may refer to as an internal support in terms of a focus. So if the practitioner visualizes, as it were, the image of the Buddha, then to begin with, the practitioner should set the mind on the individual parts of the Buddha, not the complete form to begin with. So the practitioner may start at the very top of the image of the Buddha, at the crown of the Buddha's head. There is the so-called Ushnisha, so-called in Tibetan. One starts focusing on that and then go to the next individual part of the shape and form of the Buddha till one has gone through all the individual parts of the Buddha. Once one has achieved clarity, that is to say, the part or parts one focuses upon are clearly perceived in the mind's eye, then and one is able to, for quite some time, remain upon the focus without interruptions.
That is not the chashe tenjing mikpa song. Chashe tenjing chagdo. That yet na yongzola tempe mikpa sayate.
Then one goes on to the next stage here, which is to focus on the complete form of the Buddha.
That kuzul chasang sarte tiyang yuen rindu netu vashuna.
And once one is able to remain or to maintain a one-pointed attention of the complete form of the Buddha, then
tene tat rechi la tenjingi timich mikpa songte. Ten yama songa. Ta tela kamne kuyungsu zokpe namcha Chila sem zimbane zopetin jinxie shao song do.
Det tanda drelse summa som är.
Det shucha song a. Tela zopetin jinxie ge yo res. Ta det
No, det testar gott med alltså.
oj.
Tenshenti chashirila mikpate teneyang kuyongsu sopala mikpate det chashi tension rava
Mare ko yongsu zokpa mikpa te ba te number chas yongsu zokpa mikpa song do.
yeah, so you have these two stages of the shamatha meditation here. To begin with, one concentrates on the individual parts of the image, which is known as meditation with a partial support, in that you do not focus on the complete form. Then, having become familiar with that, one concentrates on the complete form. In the context of setting the mind without concrete support, the word concrete being synonymous with physical here, so setting the mind without a physical support. And the second of the two, where one concentrates on the complete form, is named meditation with a complete support.
Loben bod bada sengete shinek gamsu jachem bu song do shinek chok sengete de bod bada de atishe lamare.
Now there is a well-known Indian Buddhist master, Bodhibhadra Changchup Zanpo in Tibetan, who was one of the gurus of Atisha, who authored a detailed description or detailed instructions as to the prerequisites for samadhi. The text is even named the prerequisites for samadhi. And in here he writes, det toppar säkert sitt myndighet innan. Nang du tepe. Toppa nisudu. Chidang nang tepa.
Yeah.
Here Bodhibhadra writes the following. Shamatha is classified into observation, which is directed outwards, and which is directed inwards. So you have these two perspectives of shamatha meditation. Chite till och tandangan så tenmer va?
Ja, det mil.
And what he says in the context of setting the mind without concrete support, which means, in terms of what was just said, namely that shamatha is classified into observation which is directed outwards and which is directed inwards. In terms of the first, shamatha as an observation of an object of meditation directed outwards, that would mean, in the context of setting the mind without concrete support, to simply visualize the image of, for example, the Buddha in front of one in space.
다가 신게 단 덩기 남칸들라 되네 다 배나 이게 아이기 삼백 번라고.
It can also be about meditating on the presence of the seed syllable a in front of one in space. So here the object of focus, or the process of observation, is that of a visualized object of meditation in space in front of one. Its presence being in space in front of one. Once one has been able to develop one-pointed attention of this object of meditation to some extent, then one goes on to the next phase, which is about shamatha meditation as a process of observation directed inwards.
Tan nangta tela lula mikpachi tan lula tenne mikpachi ni yong byote.
Tenedi toppa sekindi.
Toppa sekindi nderawa densola tenne densinegi semte top yongre chebata.
And in dependence upon these two types of processes of observation, then a calm state can be achieved. Tene digidela.
Digela tan nangta nangla tawate.
Sorry, I should have said in dependence upon the first of these two. Skill in being one-pointedly focused can be developed to some extent, and when that has happened, one can go on to the second of the two. Observation directed inwards.
Then this one top sand so big but salvo tang big bed yuan rinpo jung tumna. Then
salpo tang yun rinpo
jung tumna. Top a check that would candidate you we are the sana. But a bit sugar. Turchin karma chami loma loma nime gönchen tuk dane payul sge gamba de thoma jeb nang ki
Higher founder. Lasso?
rinzing kunzong sharap shungen jiyor. Kunzong sharap shur kong tseng.
Lasso?
Tan de la method tsu ji la zo ching gi luk de la hong la mi pa te ya chin do wa.
Kun san sherap ki tapshe.
Ma re chi tan de zo ching gi nang la tik de song yo de. Tak ka ma cha.
Tene karma chame da kun san sherap ni gi kanji jik drel go re.
Karma chame the zo ching da sak ching ni ka ga nan jo ta
Re
de.
yene detail chene kanji jik dra go gen.
Da go ye de kunzong sharap ge lama chik karma chame the. Karma chame ge kundon ne zo ching ge tik de sen yo sa ro wa. Simbare. Chik din zo sen de pa na yin ru lam pa te pa sen gen de su kab la.
Lasso?
Charan yike hong bo chil charan ge dong de la mi pa te shos. Hong. Tani kong mi pa te che sal ta
Chilo.
shilo la. Ta mi pa te se wo shi wu chi shong re. Ta karma chame le ya shu de ta hong de ge 신앙 내주 간가 홍대 그 북네 홍대 파도 술
That it's da mig pasel po chane teni kare song songo.
다 홍대 구조 담
Korang gi nang wa de la.
야
Kun san sherap gi nang wa the la hong de gu chuk yap gen do.
구조 담네 대 공바 이나 공배는 대나 공바대 애공 꾸는 홍대 그 파주 북
Da shuksa de kongpa jik nang la yina.
야
Teni hong yik de kongpa te gi sik pe puk.
야 직배 북파 간가 북네
Ya ma dro de gen.
야야 콘대 그 탐제 타마 애공 북 도와지
Lasso?
다 공금 된 대감 요기 요사로와 된 니마질 메상지
De karma chame gi ende chik dro go re khana
Ya,
ge
ya, ya.
tong ne.
동고
Ye lo chu she ge ma do.
karma chame ki ठीक nandu tab nang yore zeba
La re yene I gung kasakala kode gi chu tamche pug ma to pe bastu gom kana
gam
ge
so
re.
ire te zojin nan gam bu
Re ding ngat sokshin mission.
ta te gam sho song ne teni
Lasso?
nyamachil mesanchi ki nan kon ne sang yari yo sarwa gonzong sharap
Da kong di nupa tobre va.
Ja.
Da shivar neda ma songa digi bastu. Netup. Tene mitsang shikinangla. Da kudun chene shug de ujera va.
ta ne sang yari abjorwa kasa kala cham dong ge che de wa nyam ne che zhongbo wa
Lasso?
homeless che wa de so thoma an kong do si chen na hong ge ba de ji gam de mesang de hayang changman nam chu tan ro ya san chu cho ge ta mesang den so de tengen da chi men ro ten la ma de ge ja de oh nge mi pa se ta shue so re se te yang do wa mi pa sa ta chen na den de yong ge so te
Shini gi mikpa.
야 top 생겼던 저
So top sikte. Oh sorry, I should speak English. In terms of these two processes, we've been talking about the one with an external focus. Setting the mind without concrete support, though the object of focus, the support in question, is in the mind's eye seen as located externally in space in front of the meditator. Now, in terms of so-called attainment as to this specific method, there is the following description. In general, attainment here, meaning that the practitioner has more or less perfected the method. A short description of what that involves would be the following, namely that the focus appears crystal clear, as it were, in the mind's eye of the practitioner. And the practitioner is able to maintain that focus over long periods of time. There is the example of a well-known Buddhist practitioner of the Nyingma school, Khuensang Sherab, a disciple of the Mahasiddha Karmachame of the Kagyu school, and the story here goes as follows. Now, Karmachame himself, a Mahasiddha, was accomplished in both Mahaati and Mahamudra. And this practitioner, at the perhaps not outset of his path, but before he became a master and very well known, in that later on in life he founded one of the 6 main seats of the Nyingma school in Tibet, the Payul monastery. And at that point he was known as Ringtsin Khuensang Sherab. Now, prior to these happenings or achievements, Khuensang Sherab practiced the path as a homeless person who wandered the land of Tibet, and who, as is tradition there in terms of this setting, would ask people to house him for a while, and then he would go on perhaps to a place in solitude, and then if he descended to inhabited areas, he would again request a household to provide shelter and food for him for some time, which people gladly did. Now, at one point he was housed in a household somewhere in Tibet, and he had for a long time at that point been practicing the method just described, setting the mind without concrete support, meaning a visualized object of meditation, and you had the one that's external and the one that's internal. And here the story is connected with him achieving the level of attainment, so-called attainment, as to the first of these 2 methods. Apparently, he had been instructed by the Mahasiddha Karmachame to engage in this type of shamatha meditation, and he had been advised to focus on the seed syllable hum, resting in front of him in space. And in dependence upon that focus, achieve skill in shamatha meditation, which he did, and he developed his one-pointed focus of this object of meditation till it appeared crystal clear to him, rather. What does that mean? Well, it means that the letter in question, or the seed syllable in question, is manifest in front of the meditator, to be seen, as it were, in the mind's eye. And when an exceedingly high level of a clear perception, or clearly seeing the object in the mind's eye, is achieved, apparently, the seed syllable is not seen as a static, fixed thing. It's rather oscillating and may move. And while, which is an indication of that one is about to achieve the level of attainment as to this specific method. And at the time of staying in the household spoken of earlier, Khyentse Sherab, as usual, continued his meditation sessions while living with his family. And he is reported to later on have explained that his level of clarity, as it were, as to this meditation method, even prior to living in this household for a period of time, was at the level where he, in his mind's eye, saw the letter, or the seed syllable hung, breaking through the walls of the building he was staying in. And at one point in this household, he was told that all the pots, the kitchen pots, had broken and there were holes in them. And he understood that this was the impact of his meditation, that at this level, the so-called level of attainment, such a side effect, as it were, or such an impact can happen in effect of a perfectly clear perception of the object meditated upon, as well as the capacity to maintain that level of clarity and one-pointed focus throughout long periods of time. Now, the family, having discovered the damaged kitchen pots, thought of this as a bad omen. And so they had, not knowing all the details you've just been told, they had no idea, gone to Khyentse Sherab, the Lama that they housed and sponsored for a period of time, and told him of this bad omen. And Khyentse Sherab had told them, well, this is not a bad omen, it's the effect of my focus in meditation, it may sometimes have this impact. Don't worry, it will all be well. And so the members of the household had gone back to the kitchen area and found that the kitchen pots had been restored.
제가 밑바탕에 세 톱나 땡 오늘 뭐 가는 땜바 톱은 거와.
Người på kangla yang tempa tog
Tempa
i
tog.
dönta dit sikti kogen du
땜바 톱
dönta dit kan
가르치지 차들와.
You see, in effect of this level of clarity in meditation, then
되네 뭐부터도 간 조조라고 차들와 간가 샘낭으로와.
then the meditator can work in any way with objects, as it were. At this point it was unintentional, it simply happened, but once the meditator had become aware of what had occurred, he then was able to restore or repair the damage done to the pots in the kitchen of this household. This is just an example. Point made is ngöpo
간 like 얘네 왕 톱네 간 조조 차들와.
as all things are merely mind, this is possible. It's not something taken out of a science fiction movie, not at all. Once the mind is to this level in control of itself, in the context of, for example, shamatha meditation, then the capacity to have an impact on this or that is at hand. And it may happen both the impact unintentionally and intentionally. And this is what is named the level of attainment.
Top 생기는 단직송. 올라서 단낭라 밑바스게들라 당본 나세기 니 용거도.
Then we have, just a second, observation, which is directed inwards in the context of shamatha meditation. And here there are two kinds. The first, de toppade delarevi, jag menar, det är mara va?
말 토파데 찌탄게 찬시게. 저런 그 토파 생게 찍게 파상에 셰리.
Where the observation is the first of the two, is where the observation is directed towards the body.
다텔라 류라 mikpatang 류라 tenpa ni songre.
Or, and here we have the second type, towards something dependent on the body.
다테체데 류라 mikpa s데 nge 류인데 플라이 꾸이 ten mikpateba.
Det Nangsegiyeva Sumra, va?
Sumra.
And with respect to the first of the two, where observation is directed towards the body, you have three types. The first would be, or is, visualizing the body as a yidam.
Nipate doing de then yedam ke shansin down.
The second would be to visualize the body as an attribute of a yidam.
Somebody doing de kiru ke tambada gambia.
Or as a skeleton, and so on. These three focuses are not the only ones, you have many more.
That's on this some song at the yin at a mango yungrova. That lula tempa singetella.
Then you have the second type, where the observation is directed towards something dependent on the body. And here you have 5 types. Number 1, concentrating on the breath. On subtle parts. In terms of the body.
Then somebody rang luce natsendala tila carbon tila marble gum.
Number 3, concentrating on bindu. And here the Sanskrit word bindu is, which takes many meanings. Here it takes the meaning of a small dot in a certain position in relation to the body. For example, at some distance from a dot or bindu, as in the shape and form of a dot, at some distance from the tip of the nose.
Tene yibate le verse tondur ki pate.
Number 4, light radiating from the body.
Then ngabate doing de deve ranshim bashila mi pate.
Number 5, concentrating on the body as being an embodiment of joyful bliss.
Tatiche on the desokanga mikpandanzola yang damtong tap mendawa the tene mikpandala kamchupi.
So here there are many more objects of observation. However, the common denominator is that the purpose of all of them is to acquire skill as to the mind resting in a calm state.
That tendrek mikpam minra kaseji yona yang songale. Dona tincheta timeni kinam dogres.
Now, although there are many ways of enumerating objects of observation in other texts, they are all included in the 2 categories of with concrete support and without concrete support.
That's all. That is yetala ngo nichine singetere.
Then we've come to the 3rd subdivision here, which is setting the mind in the so-called essential nature.
Tandikala essential nature sede semge nelu ngomatela songbiya kuijira songbiya.
Essential nature here is not a reference to mind's true nature. It's a reference to the nature of the so-called alaya, the basic mind stream made up of instances of knowing.
And
The basic mind stream has two characteristics. It is both vivid and knowing.
Tene tsok dun kongi sholayan royo marko.
And it is not affected by any of the other 7 workings of the worldly mindset. Meaning, denso karere sego ma.
Tati tsok dun te karere sana gongen number chepa, yijin number chepa, nyönung pe yi senketere.
The 7 being the 5 sense perceptions, the intellect, and the so-called afflictive, obscuring working of the worldly mindset, which is primarily about the notion of a self.
Yeah. Ta tagana shinge ko jun gakpa me bare.
Now, the basic mind stream, which is not tainted by any of those 7 workings of the worldly mindset, that basic mind stream is constant. It's an uninterrupted stream of vivid and knowing instances.
Oh yeah. Tene ta kunji de gewayang mare, me gewayang mare, go long ma tingre.
And in terms of nature, it is neutral. It is neither of a virtuous nature nor of a non-virtuous nature.
Tin de tan dor na number she pa so dun ge balap de pa shichu.
So if the practitioner puts to rest the waves of object orientation produced by the 7 workings of the worldly mindset just listed, if the practitioner, by way of shamatha meditation, is able to put these waves of object orientation to rest, then
Tene ta sar ge jun sam telle yendu yo ma shoro che.
what remains is simply the constant, vivid, and knowing instances of the mind stream. That's all that's left.
Tang anzo ndila kam go yo.
And this is what we need to be able to acquaint ourselves with, to become familiar with.
Dela kam do.
And that's what the heading here refers to, setting the mind in the essential nature, namely the essential nature of the basic mind stream, which is not synonymous with mind's true nature.
Ti into dela zaza ma che na yang na shineting bolon ro wen yen ga chi yo.
However, when a practitioner has come to this point, where he's able to maintain a one-pointed attention of this essential nature, there are still risks involved. Risks that would make for the meditation becoming counterproductive to what it's supposed to end up in or be.
Yang mena ta ge number to pe balap the ratu she tendere the hong re some ten non ro yen ga chi yo.
There are practitioners who mistake this calm state free from object orientation with vipassana, which it isn't.
Tesongza ngaranzo sakshin ki nyamne nankin soge dil la zaza manana bhag kheba jinda chhe kapchen mongbo digel nang.
Now, the Mahamudra cycle of teachings are about methods and instructions and the like for the sake of enabling practitioners to attain a realization of mind's true nature. And it's very much specific to the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. And throughout Tibet's Buddhist history, there are masters of other traditions who have sort of made fun of not the entire Kagyu school, but pointed to the fact that it may have been that a number of Kagyu practitioners have mistaken the essential nature of the basic mind stream for Mahamudra, which they see as a sign of ignorance and stupidity on the part of those who have made this mistake. There are also well-known Kagyu masters, such as the 8th Karmapa Mikyo Dorje, who has warned of this and who has been quite harsh in terms of criticizing those who have drawn this mistaken conclusion. And these mistakes happen for various reasons. One of them may be that the practitioner in question, the one who makes this mistake, has not understood the terminology used, the key terms. Key terms such as object orientation, keywords such as free from mental constructs, keywords such as the natural state, keywords such as the ordinary mind and the like. That may be part of the reason, not having informed themselves enough, that some practitioners make this mistake. Therefore, in terms of meditation instructions given by a master and sometimes on the basis of a text, it's very important that the students make sure they've understood, that they've gotten all the implications of the key terms. It is very important to pay attention to the language and try to properly understand the language used. So that's all for today.
Chikbe cholen ro wa ro